Good morning and welcome to everyone. Today is the last day of our National Distance Learning Week, and we are excited that you are able to join us. So today we are joined by two fabulous colleagues from SUNY Broome Community College. I'm going to do a brief introduction for you. And during the presentation, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. We would love to get to know you a little bit as well. If we haven't met, I'm Erin. I'm the Manager of Communications and Community Engagement for SUNY Online, and it's my pleasure to host this session today. Dr. Lee Heron is an Associate Professor at SUNY Broome Community College in the Business Department. She spent 15 years working in upper management with a Fortune 100 company before transitioning to education. She's been teaching in higher education since 2005 and has been with SUNY Broome since 2013. Her passions for teaching include topics such as diversity, management, and financial wellness. Erin Frye is an associate professor at SUNY Broome in the business department. She began her higher education career with Broome in 2003 and strongly believes in the importance of community colleges incorporating technology into instruction and supporting student success. Her teaching interests include business statistics, marketing research, and self-management. So welcome to all, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Erin, for this opportunity. Both Lee and I are very honored to be presenting for SUNY, and thank you everybody in attendance here today. So I am Erin Frye. I'll be talking about my experience teaching Business 115, Business Statistics, in a Hyflex format. So I've taught this course for 10 years now in various modalities. I've taught face-to-face, fully online asynchronous, and in a blended format. This is a required course for most of our business programs here at SUNY Broome. It's in our AS transfer programs, as well as several of our AAS degree programs. In addition to being a business requirement, it is also a general education math course. So I do get students from around the entire college in this course. So being a gen ed math, it does have a more quantitative focus, and much of our lessons involve, going over formulas, applying them to different business situations, working through problems and crunching through math calculations.
And my name is Lee Heron. I'm going to be talking to you today about the Business 215 class. It's called Diversity in Organizations. It's a fairly new course in our business program, but it is I've been teaching that class both face-to-face and asynchronously online. It is one of those required courses in many of our business programs. And this class too is a gen ed class in the social science realm. So similar to Erin's statistics class, I tend to get students from, cross campus taking a social science class, which is kind of nice because it really kind of lends voices from a bunch of different programs to, both of our classes. Whereas when I think about Erin's class in terms of, the quantitative nature, my classes, I think, a little bit more qualitative theories. So these are some of our objectives. I'm going to talk through these here in a second, but I want to make sure that, everybody on the call, that we're kind of all on the same page in terms of, what Hyflex actually is. And we think of Hyflex, and we use the SUNY Online definition, by the way, but when you're teaching a Hyflex class, it's basically giving students the opportunity to learn in 3 different formats. So the first format is a fairly traditional format where, they come face-to-face, they come into the classroom and, they sit down and have a conversation with you. The secondary format is asynchronously, which, if somebody says that they're teaching completely online, that's what we think of in terms of asynchronous. And during COVID, many of us were doing some classes synchronously. So for example, if I have a class Monday and Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, my students can come face-to-face, and or they can join on Zoom at the very same time. So that's the synchronous nature of Hyflex. So here's some of our objectives for the presentation this morning. What were Erin's and my initial decision in terms of how we're going to deliver this modality to our fall semester class. I am also going to talk through the assistance in training that we received from our instructional designers and from our technical support people, which, by the way, were just huge helps. We will talk about the implementation of Hyflex. Basically, how do you move from either a face-to-face format or asynchronous format to being a Hyflex course. We'll talk through some of the challenges, which I think for Erin and I both, I mean, anytime you try something new, there's always going to be challenges. So, kind of talking through some of our challenges with Hyflex. We will share some pretty interesting statistics with you during the presentation, which at least when we were doing the presentation, were very eye-opening numbers. And then finally, we'll give you a student perspective in terms of, we asked some of our Hyflex students what they thought of this modality, and we'll hear from them.
So why did we try to use this Hyflex modality this semester? The first big reason is due to COVID. Last year, I started dabbling in the Hyflex modality without even realizing it at the time. So the fall 2020 semester, I was delivering my business statistics course in a blended format. So students could come in the classroom once a week. We had to break up the class into groups to make sure there wasn't too many people there at a time for social distancing purposes. So students came once a week, and then they did the remainder of the work online. We ended up having to shift fully remote for a portion of the semester last fall due to an uptick in local COVID cases. And I delivered my classes via Zoom during that time. When we were able to come back to campus, I didn't want students having to come if they were uncomfortable, being there, because COVID was still an issue. So I started to allow students to either attend in person or log in via Zoom. So I was delivering the class using both methods. Continued that into the spring 2021 semester. Okay? Students could be there in person or on Zoom, whatever they were most comfortable with. And I was recording the lessons and posting them on my Blackboard, still requiring the students to attend, though, at that specific time. And I started to think, why am I requiring them to be here, either in person or on Zoom at this specific time? So that was about mid-semester, and that's when we were making up the schedule for the fall. And I said, okay, let's try this in Hyflex and really incorporate that third asynchronous piece to that Hyflex puzzle.
And the second reason that I think for both of us to decide to incorporate Hyflex into our teaching for the fall 2021, I think for both Erin and I, we're very, very student-centered. So we wanted to be a little bit more flexible, but also give them options. Anybody that teaches at a community college probably understands that the wide range of our target market is incredible. I'll have an 18-year-old in my class, but I will also have somebody in their 50s in that class. We have a lot of working adults. When I ask students if they're working, probably 90% of them raise their hands. So we wanted to give them these options in terms of how they're actually going to receive the content for the class. So besides just, coming face-to-face or asynchronously, as Erin was speaking to, we're giving this added option about maybe viewing a recorded lecture and not actually having to be present in the room. The third reason for making this decision is really just the added component of exploring different forms of technology. How do we meet the students where they're at? How do we meet them where they need to be met at? And some of that really kind of comes from, using these different forms of technology. For example, using Zoom to, bring our synchronous students into the classroom. We use Ensemble to do our videos. SUNY Broome is using currently, our LMS is Blackboard. So how do we use these pieces of technology to really kind of connect with each one of our students? And if you think about it, some of this really kind of stems from what Erin spoke to, is it really all kind of we looked at this from the big picture of COVID, like how do we reach more students? So here's some of the things that we actually received from our instructional designers. And by the way, for Erin and I to make this initial decision, we really, I think it was back in March of 2021, that's when we really kind of started to explore, what do we want to do for the fall? And, how do we want to deliver our content? And, we really have a very awesome relationship with our chair in the business department. And when we said we wanted to try Hyflex, he was completely on board. So once we started to, look at this Hyflex modality, we had to really kind of reach out to our IDs and reach out to some of our tech people. How are we going to deliver our content? So this is some of the training that we received from our instructional designers. And by the way, as I said, we started this back in March, but really throughout the summer, Erin and I were actually coming into the school and practicing many of these things that I'm going to talk to you about, just to make sure that when we actually got to the fall semester, that we were a lot more confident in terms of what happens if this happens, what happens if that happens, etc. So before I kind of go into the 4 different pieces from our IDs, one of the things that I remember from our instructional designers, actually a couple of things, but they wanted to make sure that we were already teaching that particular course in an asynchronous format. So both Erin and I had been teaching her stats and my diversity class in an asynchronous format. So we basically, if you think about it, we had the shell and we had the content already laid out for that asynchronous portion of, that format for the Hyflex. So that was one thing. The other 2 things that our IDs did for us, which, again, I really appreciated, but they did what was called an accessibility review on my class and on her class. They also did something that, SUNY Online really recommends, is that Oscar rubric. So they did that accessibility and Oscar rubric check and, gave us our outcomes. And, we made, some adjustments just based on some of those rubrics. So in terms of what we actually received from our IDs, well, we received these modality mapping checklists. So, we explored what each of our SLOs were for our classes, and then we would talk through, what our LMS could provide us in terms of giving the same experience for both or for all 3 modalities. And, by the way, in our classes, students can kind of flip through any of those modalities at any point. They don't all have to come face to face. For example, somebody might come face to face on Monday, and then they might do something asynchronous on Wednesday. They also gave us our course development timelines. So, at certain points, we should have X task completed. Again, that was really helpful throughout the summer because, again, Erin and I aren't in the school every day. So just making sure that we were, up to date on where we should be with these checklists. They would also send us pretty much every Monday, if I remember, but they would give us these timeline countdowns. And, for example, one would say, listen, you're 8 weeks, before the fall semester, you should be done with this, you should be done with that. If you need help with this, if you need help with that. And so again, identifying where we should be in that timeline so that when Erin and I, came in for our fall semester, we weren't kind of like, what do I do now? So we had all of that, kind of covered. And then the last thing that this was very, very helpful, at least for me, because as Erin said, she was already recording her lectures. I was on Zoom and I was face to face, but I wasn't actually recording my lectures. So the checklist for the Hyflex classroom was very helpful because we talked about, what kind of hardware do we need? What kind of software do we need? And all those kind of logistics in terms of, how do we set up our actual class? Again, to be able to deliver in those 3 modalities. From a technical standpoint, again, huge help for me. But we are in the same, Erin and I are in the same room teaching our Hyflex class here at SUNY Broome. And the one room that we're in, there are actually a few different cameras set up in the room. So, our tech people were able to show us, where does that camera sit? Where does that kind of view in terms of what maybe a person on Zoom or people face to face, what do they see? So, learning where the cameras are located, learning how to manipulate them, maybe move them around. And the same thing with the speakers, where are the speakers? If a student says something face to face, how do the folks on Zoom hear those people, and vice versa? So those were really kind of important components in terms of, learning and again, kind of creating, a sense of normalcy when we walked in for the fall semester. So we had that practice throughout the summer. And then sharing your screen. Again, we use Zoom. So, when you're sharing your screen, what do the folks on Zoom see? What do the folks in the room see? And then ultimately, when you're recording your lectures, what are your asynchronous students actually going to see? I'm going to actually let Erin talk to you about using tablets, because in her stats class, that's what she uses.
Yeah, so that was one of the first issues I had to deal with technically. How am I going to show these problems that we are solving? So I was using a tablet with a Surface Pen. I'm able to hook that up to the classroom projector. So people who are in the classroom, the work's being displayed on the big screen. That is the screen that I'm sharing on Zoom, and that's the screen that's being recorded if anybody wants to watch the lecture later. So that has worked out really well, makes for a nice, crisp, clear display. I'm inhaling a whole lot less chalk dust than I was pre-COVID, because I was still using the chalkboard. So it's a lot neater and clearer. And I can save my writing as a PDF file if any student needs to access it at a later point. So that's been a nice technology piece that's really helped me out with the Hyflex modality.
So some of the challenges, and again, I said this earlier in the presentation, but I think with anything that you do new in a workplace, there's always going to be these challenges. One of the things that I also remember from my IDs in the summertime was, it was almost like every single time we had these meetings, they're like, always have a plan B, always have a plan B. And, I really do remember that going into the fall semester, especially with technical pieces that, kind of came up in the fall semester, where sometimes the camera would be changed from what the location that I had. So how do I change the camera back? Or, somebody might change, the speaker in terms of, what the speaker output would be. How do I change that back? So there's always going to be these technical pieces to, I think, starting something new. Also, when you think about the technical aspects, think about that when, especially for our students on Zoom, I think for my classes, especially, I don't know about Erin, I'll let her talk about that, but I don't require cameras on. So part of that is, again, another technical aspect of, making sure that the people on Zoom are seeing what we're seeing. Also, before and after class, literally, I used to bring in a checklist with me, at least for the first 2 or 3 weeks of my Hyflex class. So before class, I would, check this off. I do this. I open my Zoom account. I, get my content ready. I kind of test my speakers and all that stuff. After class, you got to save your Zoom video, and where are you going to save it to? Is there somebody in that class after you so that you have time, because it does take a few minutes to save the Zoom video. Is there somebody in that class afterwards so that where you're going to save it to kind of get out of the room before, the next class comes in? So creating these checklists was super helpful for me, again, because again, something new, you want to make sure that you're kind of getting it all done. And then participation. This is another thing that, at least for myself, my IDs helped me with. I usually, with my face-to-face classes, I would have these activities where I would give students, and we would do them in person that day. When I'm learning with Hyflex, is I give them these activities, a week ahead of time. So when it gets to that particular day, I can really kind of incorporate participation from, all students. So, I call my people on Zoom Zoomers. So I'm like, okay, Zoomers, it's your turn. Let's, talk about this particular piece. And then, they just unmute themselves and then they speak, and then everybody in the class and other Zoom people hear it.
I've had similar challenges. With the technical side of things, I always make sure I get in a little bit early, double check my setup, make sure that everything is displaying properly in the classroom and that it's showing up properly on Zoom. And one of the things I needed to get used to early on was remembering that the Zoom students were there and like, oh, I got to make eye contact with the camera periodically. It's easy to understand, yes, there's students in front of me, but I got to remember those people on Zoom as well. I'm a checklist person. So before class, I'd have those things, make sure to run through. And then after class, the big thing, again, is saving that video. It's got to convert. We upload it to Ensemble and then put it into our course Blackboards. And I know I have a few students who told me, that evening they're going to be watching the video. So I want to make sure that is up for them in a timely manner. And then incorporating participation from everybody is a challenge as well. I also do not require the students to turn their cameras on. So I always make sure to stop periodically, make sure everybody on Zoom is okay, just as I would to make sure that everybody in the classroom is okay. And encouraging my Zoom students to speak up if needed. They are always free to unmute and interrupt and ask a question. And I understand some of them might not want to do that, knowing that their voice is kind of being projected to the whole classroom. So encouraging them, yes, you can use the chat. I always make sure to keep on top of the chat and present those questions to the entire class if I get something via the chat box. I also wanted to make sure that the students who are typically participating asynchronously feel like they are part of the group as well. So I do use an online discussion board every week in the Hyflex class that everybody is required to participate in. And that has worked out really well, creating that classroom environment. I have discussions that are focused on news articles that talk about statistics. That's what I had been doing for many years in my asynchronous class. But this semester, I've incorporated some weeks, I have them make up a problem and make a mistake in it. And then you got to go and correct other students' mistakes. That worked out way better than I thought it would. Students told me, oh, I had fun. I'm going to make up another problem, which was awesome. Another great discussion before we have our testing weeks. I have students, put down, what do you still have questions on? And they have been awesome at helping each other work through the questions that they still have. So really made me feel that they are all having that classroom experience. So, that's one big thing. In addition to the challenges we've also had some real positive things. The big thing that we're finding is that our students are empowered to help themselves, maybe more so than they would be in a traditional face-to-face class. We find that we're getting fewer emails from our Hyflex students. Not that we're always happy to answer emails, but we have fewer of those kind of administrative type messages coming through, like, oh, I can't come to class. What can I do to make up that class? What did I miss, etc. Because students can go and they have these resources on our LMS. They can go watch the video and answer their own questions if that works out for them. All right, so some other positives that we are finding, we kind of uncovered through looking at some statistics. So our campus does use Starfish. If you're not familiar with what that is, it is a student success and retention platform. Helps facilitate communication with the students and help them connect with their support network around campus. One of the ways that faculty use Starfish is through raising flags or kudos. So flags, these are early alerts to let students know that maybe they're missing assignments, or their attendance is a concern, or their grade is slipping a bit lower. And kudos, those are those positive messages, kind of give some reinforcement and encouragement to students. So we can raise these flags or kudos at any point during the semester, but we also have progress surveys that are given periodically throughout the semester, where we can give this feedback kind of in bulk. So our first progress survey happens around week 3. And the big flag that both Lee and I give at that point is missing assignments. If any of my students are missing their coursework, I send them a missing assignments flag. So I was doing my week 3 progress survey, and I do have a face-to-face traditional business statistics section this semester in addition to Hyflex. And I found, like, wow, my Hyflex students are receiving many fewer flags. 26% of my face-to-face class got a missing assignment flag versus 12% of my Hyflex section. Week 8, we had another midterm progress survey. The flag that we give there is a D or F grade. And I found similar results. 32% of my traditional class received a D or F flag versus 15% of my Hyflex section. All right, so Lee's office right down the hall from me. I was working on my week 3 progress survey, and then I hear Lee coming, and she's like, Erin, my Hyflex class is, I'm giving way fewer flags. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm getting the same results. So she doesn't have a face-to-face diversity class this semester, but she was able to pull her statistics from her spring semester. And she found that 36% of her face-to-face diversity class last spring got a missing assignment flag versus 18% of her Hyflex section this semester. And then the midterm week 8 progress survey, about 40% of the diversity class face-to-face got a flag versus 15% of the Hyflex class. So this was really eye-opening to us, and like, wow, this really could be making a difference for the students. And we don't just give out flags. We are both big believers in giving those positive doses of encouragement. So looking at our most recent week 8 progress survey, the kudos message that happens there is a little keep up the good work encouragement. So I gave 85% of my statistics class a keep up the good work kudos, and Lee gave 78% of her Hyflex class a keep up the good work kudos. So we love this. And especially I think this is important for the asynchronous students. Those students who typically aren't coming face-to-face or on Zoom, just as another way to maintain a line of communication with them and say, yep, we see you, you're doing great, keep it up. Other stats that we've been keeping track of is how the students are actually participating. And this was both of our big questions going into the semester. It was like, what are students going to be doing here? Are we going to have anybody in the classroom, or is everybody going to be on Zoom, or is everybody going to be doing their work fully online? So we have both found that we kind of have a cohort that typically comes in person, a cohort who typically is on Zoom, and a cohort who is typically working asynchronously. But then there's a group that kind of likes to bounce between those 3 different modalities. So every class session, I've been keeping track how many people in all 3 modalities. And I found recently my Zoom participation has been on the rise. And that could be for many reasons. I have been getting some messages from students saying, oh, I'm not feeling well, weather's getting colder, people are getting sick, and people don't want to expose their classmates, especially potentially if they have COVID. Also, I found the in-person attendance might fluctuate with the difficulty of the material. If we're going over a slightly less challenging lesson, I get less people in person than when we hit the harder material. So like even this past week, a little more challenging. My in-class attendance on Tuesday was higher than it had been previously. So Lee's been keeping track as well for her diversity class. She's found that her asynchronous participation is on the rise. And again, could be for many reasons, but one possible reason we were thinking is that the students are more comfortable with the Hyflex modality now, and they're starting to understand what they can and can't do. So, if they're empowered to do the work asynchronously, they realize, okay, this is an option for me. So it'll be interesting. We're still keeping track, so we'll see how the kind of semester finishes off in regards to how people are attending.
So let's kind of finish off the presentation today and share with you a few testimonials from some of our students. This is one of my students. Her name is Kim, and Kim is in my diversity class. So we can listen to what Kim thinks about Hyflex.
Hello, my name is Kim. I am a student at SUNY Broome Community College, and I am in the Business Administration course. Before this class, I'd never heard of a Hyflex class, but after taking it, it really allows me to get the most out of my education. I'm currently an event planner at a local business, so it really allows me to get the most out of my education because I can watch lectures after class. If I've missed a class, my schedule changes on a week-to-week basis or even daily, so it really allows me to get all the lectures and all the material that I need.
So, as you hear from Kim, I was saying this earlier in our presentation for community colleges, especially, we have all these working adults, and Kim is one of those people that, at least in terms of attendance, that, you kind of see her doing a bunch of different things. Sometimes she'll come face to face, sometimes she'll do things asynchronously. And, I've never actually seen her on Zoom, but you can see that, the viability of this modality for, a working adult, for example. And this next testimonial is from another one of my my diversity students, and it kind of was a real eye opener, I think, for both Erin and myself. But she writes down that it's an amazing class. It gives her some options. She also felt like it was a really good transition from being fully online, during COVID, to having a little bit more interaction with classmates and professors. And this is the one thing that I did not really realize, moving to Hyflex and maybe how this might impact somebody. But this particular student has actually been diagnosed as being socially anxious. She actually has a service dog. And, for somebody that has maybe one of these hidden disabilities that maybe we just don't see, I think this is a really good option for somebody in terms of just diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do we, look at that, target market as a community college, giving them, again, I said that this would be at the beginning of the presentation, how do we meet students where they're at?
Actually, I collected some testimonials from my students as well. One of my students is a criminal justice major, and she was able to structure her schedule. So she has a criminal justice lab on Tuesdays, which conflicts with our class time. So on Tuesdays, she does her work asynchronously. She's the one who, I know she's going to be watching the video when she gets home on Tuesday, so I got to make sure it's up for her to see. Then she comes in person on Thursdays, and that was important to her because she wasn't terribly confident in her math skills, and she was really happy to still be able to have some face-to-face contact in the classroom every week. And she, and I have another student as well who said having that video to watch or go back to is extremely helpful. Even if the student does attend the class, if they have a question afterwards, or if anything was unclear, they can go back as a refresher, and they can work through it as fast or as slow as they need to. They can fast forward to the parts that they get and then slow down, pause, and take their time on the portions where things are a little bit more unclear. So overall, students have said it's really helped them manage their time more, and balance all the work they have between their various classes and their other responsibilities in life. So in conclusion, both Leah and I are really happy with and encouraged by how our Hyflex sections are going this semester. So much that we are both expanding our Hyflex offerings next spring. I'll be doing all of my course sections in Hyflex, both business statistics and the other courses that I'll be teaching, marketing research and self-management. And Lee is doing her classes that would be face-to-face in a Hyflex modality as well. So we're really excited by this and interested to see how this semester ends up playing out and what next semester has to hold for us as well. So we'll open it up now for any questions that people have. And I'll stop sharing. I can pull the slides up again if anybody needs to see them though.
Great, thank you. I do see a question in the chat from Jian. How long does it take to upload the class sessions? Are they really large?
I mean, it takes in the classroom, it takes probably 2 or 3 minutes. I save it to what I call my Z drive. And then I come to my office, I move it from my Z drive and throw it into Ensemble. And that takes about 3 or 4 minutes too. So, I mean, there is a process to that. But again, as Erin alluded to earlier, we are getting less pieces of communication in terms of, I'm sick, my car, we just don't hear any of that stuff anymore. It is, now they know how they can get their content in a lot more realistic manner.
Now, my videos do take a little longer to process. I mentioned I am using a tablet, so it makes for a bigger video file that takes sometimes like up a half hour to save. But I am using a laptop, so I can take that laptop with me out of the classroom and have it process. And then just takes a few minutes to upload to Ensemble and then post to my Blackboard. But the intensity of what's going on the screen kind of ups the file size and takes a little bit longer.
I also see that Lee has a question.
Morning.
Hi.
That was a great presentation. That was awesome. And I know I'm a professor in the Criminal Justice and Emergency Services Department. And I know that this really helps our students because our students often take business courses as well, especially Business 115. So, and 215, right? Yeah, they take both.
Yeah.
So it does really help our students. So from like a division perspective and college perspective, it's awesome. But I have a question about participation. Okay. So when I teach an in-person course, and I was doing like both Erin and Lee where I was doing the Zoom plus the in-person throughout COVID pretty much. But how do you tackle, I mean, I suppose I'd have to take that class participation piece out of that, or how do you tackle like discussion questions? So obviously the Zoom and in-person is easy. You could do that in class. But in terms of then do you have a separate one that your online asynchronous students have to complete that week?
Yeah, so I think Erin and I both have different philosophies on this. What I do is, and I think Erin, I mean, she talked about this too, but I have an online weekly question that every single student, whether you come to class, whether you're synchronous or whether you're asynchronous, everybody's in that discussion. And I used to take attendance like face-to-face and actually give points. I took that out of this modality because I have to think about the asynchronous piece too. So as long as they're, working in that asynchronous mode, and the asynchronous are also doing some of those activities that we do face-to-face. So I try to make sure that everybody's getting the same experience, between the three.
And I also have a weekly discussion that everybody needs to post in, no matter how they're participating that week. And I kind of make it a menu where they can get their participation points. I do give them some points if they attend the classes synchronously. So basically, if somebody is working totally asynchronously, they do kind of an extra discussion post, just an extra reply to their classmates. And they get their point when they come to the classroom. I don't require them to like ask questions and participate. I know that my course can bring about math anxiety for a lot of people, and calling on some of them regarding math problems can make people a little distressed sometimes. So, people do participate and ask questions and answer questions, but I don't require them to talk in class if they don't want to.
Yeah, so I see John's question in there about taking attendance. It takes me 30 seconds at the beginning of class. I take attendance to see who's on Zoom. I take, see who's face-to-face. And then when I pop back in my office, that's when I'm kind of, or when I actually have the first post due for that weekly discussion, that's where I'm kind of looking at my students on asynchronous, in that asynchronous format.
And mine's pretty quick as well. Just especially once I get to know everybody is 30 seconds to mark everybody down and tally things up at the end of class. It does take me a little longer when I tally up their participation points for the week, because I do have it so they get some points if they come to class, and then they get points for the discussion. So I do have, again, it takes maybe 10 to 15 minutes to tally all that up every week and get it put into my Blackboard grade book.
See,
A
to
little
me,
more work than I
the
think.
idea of it, people coming in late, or keeping track of all of that, that would be hard to juggle all of that, and make sure that it's accurate. And then are there different ways in which you handle that tardiness?
It's just something I've gotten used to. I have my notifications set so that we hear a ding if somebody comes into the Zoom room. So I've just kind of gotten the habit, when I see that, I can just kind of seamlessly pull my list up, check them off as I'm doing the lessons still. So it just took a little practice to get to the point where I could seamlessly do that.
Yeah, the same thing. I think anytime you do, some of this new stuff, it just takes a while to kind of coordinate and figure out, when do I do what at what time. But, once you kind of get into the whole rhythm, it doesn't take that long.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
May I ask a follow-up?
Of course.
Okay. So I'm also really big on group assignments in class. And I know that Lee, I've heard you, lecture, and I've heard you kind of do some group type activities. So would you do like a group activity in class and on Zoom? Like, I was a big fan of putting them into breakout rooms on Zoom. They loved that because then they got to interact with their classmates without me in the room. So that was also helpful. And I feel like you could do that on Zoom and in the classroom, but then would you have a separate kind of opportunity for maybe not a group assignment, but they could do it individually that week as well, if you were talking your online asynchronous?
Yeah, so I still do group activities. And again, something that I've, this is something that helped me with my IDs early in the summer is, I give these things, ahead of time. So, I literally just break students into these groups on Blackboard. And so they know coming into, Wednesday's class, listen, student X, Y, and Z, you guys are going to I just did it for my religion chapter for next week. So, students 1, 2, and 3, you guys are going to present Buddhists. Students 4, 5, and 6, you guys are going to present Catholics. And it doesn't matter if you're on Zoom or wherever or asynchronously, there's another discussion. So everybody kind of is engaged in presenting. So that's just kind of how I've worked it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see Stephanie's comment. The instructional designers have been a huge help. Making sure that they help us brainstorm ideas over the summer, to get all 3 modalities, participating and making sure that all 3 modalities are hitting the learning objectives of our courses.
Yeah, I see Susan on the call, and kudos to her, because that's the person that really was kind of driving the bus over the summertime for us, and really, again, kind of kept us in check in terms of what we should be having and done at a certain point in time. So, I don't know that I could have, started the fall semester without having all of that knowledge, and especially, from a technical standpoint too. They were good practice students.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that you highlighted that in the beginning of your presentation too. That partnership with the folks and the resources on your campus is so important. And so that's great that some of you could be here today too.
Awesome.
Are there other questions or comments? You do have the ability to unmute yourself if you prefer.
Hi, this is Stephanie Malmberg. And there's an echo because we're all together in one room, basically. Let me go back here. I just wanted to say, Lee and Erin are 2 of the most willing faculty members that I've ever worked with. And so whenever I get a crazy idea, I know that we can run it by them first, and they'll tell us about it. They'll give us some really great feedback. And certainly, you know, the Hyflex project, they're part of our first cohort. We're in the process of training our second cohort now. Our training has been refined based on their consistent engagement and their conversations with Susan. It's just been a real pleasure for us to be able to partner this way.
Terrific. Thank you, Stephanie. And I really appreciate all the student feedback too, right? That's always what we look for, those success stories. And then they sort of brought to light some things that maybe we hadn't considered too. So those were really great examples.
Yeah, I just did not expect that, you know, accessibility piece to, you know, somebody that might have something like that social anxiety. I did not, that did not even cross my mind about this modality helping, you know, those types of folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, we are at time, so I will close this out here. Just pull up a little slide for everyone. So I want to thank, of course, Lee and Erin for your presentation and for sharing what you've learned so far this semester. We wish you all the best as you close out that with students. The next session for National Distance Learning Week today will be at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to close this room and then we'll reopen it shortly. We would appreciate your feedback. We have a little bit of a survey for this week. If you've attended any sessions, that's helpful for us. And then we have all of the recordings are available on the registration site. So everybody can access those. I'll put those in the chat for you right now. So again, thanks to everyone for your attention and your time today. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.